On the night of January 19th, 1988, 19-year-old Susan Swedell called her mother to let her know that she'd be home, soon to join her and her sister for some popcorn and a movie. She had worked a long day, juggling both of her jobs, and she was really looking forward to just clocking out and heading home for a quiet evening with her family. A huge snowstorm had hit that day, and her sister and her mom were anxiously waiting for her as they watched the snow piling so high that they could barely see out their windows. However, after hours of waiting, Susan never came home. Something didn't feel right. She would have called them and let them know if she was going to be late or if something had happened, so her family wasted no more time and immediately called the police. Her family was so worried. They were asking themselves, why didn't she come home? Where was she, and what happened that night after she left work? Well, during the investigation, it was revealed that someone did see her after she left work, and she wasn't alone. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to True Crime Jacki. I hope you're all doing super well. Thank you so much for being here to listen to today's case. If you guys are new here, welcome. My name is Jacki, and I make true crime videos every single week covering cases that you may not have heard of before that need more attention, and videos to spread awareness on how to stay safe and stay informed. I hope that you guys can join our familia and help us spread awareness together through this channel and through my other platforms, which are linked down below. Now, before we get into today's video, I want to give a special shout out to our familia, members watching this video early on. YouTube, thank you for being a part of our YouTube membership. It means the world to me. I also want to mention that we are back on Spotify and Apple Podcast. It is no longer under the What Happened with Jacki Flores name. We renamed it to True Crime Jacki, so it's just easier to search. We're also working on getting Let's Set the Scene, which is my second YouTube channel where I discuss fictional movies and books. We're working to get that on audio platforms as well, so stay tuned for that. Now, today we're going to be talking about a case from Minnesota where on the night of January 19th, 1988, 19-year-old Susan Swedell disappeared after driving home from work during a snowstorm. She had planned a quiet evening with her family after her shift at work, but she never arrived. Her loved ones were left with heartbreak and many questions, which sadly remain unanswered to this day. Over 38 years later, I think it's so important to discuss unsolved cases and continue to spread awareness on them. Although so many years have passed, her family is still looking for answers, and it's just important to get this case, back into the spotlight. And even if just one person watches this video that may know something that has to do with this case, that just makes it so valuable. So please continue to share Susan's story. And with that, let's jump right in. Susan Ann Swedell was born on February 13th, 1968 to her parents John and Kathy. When she was just 3, she welcomed her younger sister, Christine, to the family. Their parents divorced when they were just 6 and 3, and they grew closer as they supported each other. Through that big change, their father relocated to another city where he remarried and had more children, so although Susan and Christine gained step-siblings, they remained mainly distant in their day-to-day lives. By the time the girls were 12 and 15, their mother, Kathy, was awarded full custody, and the 3 permanently settled into their home in Lake Elmo, Minnesota. Her family says that Susan was bubbly, outgoing, and deeply sentimental. She had a huge heart, and her family described her as kind of being like the girl next door because she was really pretty. She was friendly, kind, and especially smart. She had a genuine love for her studies, specifically psychology and Spanish, and she had the kind of focus and dedication that really set her apart from most teens. Music especially was at the heart of her life. She sang in the choir, she played handbells at church, and she adored anything and everything that had to do with acting and musicals. Now, besides being indoors and singing and acting in plays, she also really loved the outdoors, such as biking along trails, camping under the stars, or just enjoying time at her grandmother's lake house. In addition to all of this, Susan loved spending time with her friends and, like many young girls, chatting with boys. In high school, she began dating an exchange student from Japan who she really liked However, the relationship just didn't really work out because he eventually had to return home. So, she understandably was disappointed. After graduating from Stillwater Area High School, Susan went on to study at the University of Wisconsin River Falls, but after 2 semesters, she started to get very homesick and she just decided to go back home. Despite her academic focus, her heart remained with her family, and she realized that she just didn't want to be apart from them, so she went back. Now that Susan was back home, she was determined to get a job, and after interviewing around town, she actually landed 2 of them. She worked at a Kmart and a little boutique called Body and Soul, both in the St. Croix Mall. Now, her co-workers described her as just genuinely pleasant, kind, and that they honestly just liked being around her. Even with back-to-back shifts, she stayed reliable. She kept a predictable schedule and somehow made balancing these 2 jobs look effortless. It was also around this time that her social life started to shift a bit. She met a boy who lived down the street from her grandmother's lake house, and they hit it off. And she eventually started her second relationship with him, her first again being the exchange student from Japan. However, like a lot of teen romances, it didn't last, but Susan didn't really let that slow her down. Yes, she was upset about this relationship ending, but she was also excited to continue meeting other people. Eventually, she and her sister Christine were really close, as I mentioned, and they started going out to a 21 and under club called Bumpers. And one night while they were there, she met a guy that she really clicked with, who actually happened to be the son of the club's owner. He even came by their family home a few times to visit Susan, but as far 57 as her family knows, he wasn't considered a serious boyfriend. They were kind of just, talking and hanging out. So Susan was also meeting boys on chat lines, which in the 80s was like joining a group chat via phone calls. And she would leave post-it notes with names of the guys that she had met on her dresser, guys that she was interested in. And she even mentioned to her mom that she wanted one of them, a man named Dale, to meet her in person. But sadly, that day never came, which brings us to Tuesday, January 19th, 1988. That morning, Susan and her sister started their day like any other. They had breakfast together with their usual sisterly banter before getting the day started. First, their mom, Kathy, left for work at the University of Minnesota in Minneapolis, and then Christine headed off to school. And finally, Susan set out for her full day of work. She opened the Body and Soul boutique at 9 a.m., and she worked for a few hours before wrapping up at around 100 p.m. She had just enough time for a quick break before starting her second shift at Kmart, which was scheduled for 1:30 p.m. Now, luckily, both stores were in the same mall, and they even shared a parking lot, so she didn't even have to move her car between shifts. All she had to do was get through this second shift, and then she'd be back home in no time. Now, as the day went on, the weather started to change. A blizzard was moving in over Lake Elmo, and the snow began to pick up quickly. It was normal for Susan to check in with her family throughout the day, and when she checked in during her second shift at Kmart, her mom, Kathy, reminded her to just be careful driving home, to stick to the main roads and to make sure that she was visible in the storm. Susan, who was naturally cautious about driving in the snow, reassured her mom and promised her that she would be careful and that she would be home after work so that they could all cuddle up together and watch a movie and have some popcorn. So when Susan was getting ready to leave work at around 9:12 p.m. after finishing her shift at Kmart, she changed out of her work outfit into something else. She had been wearing red pants, and then she swapped them for like a mid-length skirt. And then on top of that, she wasn't wearing a coat. Now her manager realized that she had changed clothes, and she even made a comment letting her know that she thought her outfit was a bit inappropriate for the weather. He just thought it was a bit odd that she changed into a skirt, considering the blizzard was going on outside, but it was done at this point. Susan changed her outfits, and then she was off. She clocked out. She drove off, and during the ride back home, the snow began coming down even harder. The blizzard was making it nearly impossible to see more than a few feet ahead, but Susan remained focused, and she drove carefully. Once, she was nearly just a mile away from her home, she realized that something was wrong. Her 1975 maroon Oldsmobile Cutlass began to overheat and smoke began blowing out from under the hood. Panicked, but trying to stay calm, she pulled into a nearby gas station, again only a mile away from her home. Now back at, her family home, her mom, Kathy, and sister Christine were getting very worried. Susan was usually home by 9:30 p.m., but 11 p.m. came along and Susan still had not made it home. Kathy and Christine knew that this just wasn't normal, and they called the police right away. The snow outside had turned into a full-blown blizzard, piled up to 7 on the roads, and they were really worried that something bad might have happened to her on her drive home. It wasn't long before deputies began searching for Susan's car. Police were searching everywhere. They were searching, like anywhere along the mall where she worked at. Then they were also searching the ditches near Kmart to the streets leading to her home in downtown Lake Elmo, but they found no sign of her. It wasn't until the following day that deputies located Susan's car. They found it at the gas station, which was again a mile away from her home, but Susan herself was nowhere to be found. Her car was found locked, and when investigators looked inside, they found all of her belongings, including her glasses, which she needs to see. Her mom said that she really could not see without them, her driver's license and her purse. So, to authorities, Susan's most important belongings still in the car made it clear that she intended to come back to get them, but clearly that didn't happen. So where did she go? Why didn't she return to her car? When investigators spoke with the gas station attendant, she explained that Susan had pulled in around 9:30 p.m. and that almost as soon as she pulled in, another light-colored older model car pulled in as well. Then a man stepped out of this car. This man was described as tall and well-built, with shoulder-length sandy brown hair and a few days' growth of beard, wearing a leather bomber jacket. So after he got out of the car, he approached Susan and they spoke near her car for about 15 minutes. Then she went inside the gas station to speak with the attendant, and she explained to her that her car had been overheating and she wasn't able to drive it much farther back, and asked if she could just leave the car here while they figured out the issue. The attendant said that it was okay, but that she would have to move it out of the way where the snowplows would be coming through soon. So Susan went back outside and she moved her car out of the way as much as she could, and then she continued speaking with the man from before. After they spoke a bit more, Susan climbed into his car. So this was Susan's first time dealing with car trouble, and she panicked. No. 11:06, she was a teenager. She was only 19 years old. It was late. It was freezing cold. There was a blizzard, and she felt completely out of her element at this moment. However, that man there was maybe offering to help her, so she accepted it. I mean, it's unknown specifically what this man said to convince Susan to get in the car, or if she knew him in the first place, but either way, it was a decision she made in a moment of high stress, and unfortunately, that would be the last confirmed sighting of Susan. Her mother, Kathy, said, quote, "We don't know what happened that night. She was telling us that she was good to come home because it was an all-out Minnesota blizzard. When I looked out our window, I could barely see across the street, and here she was driving home. We didn't know if she had stopped someplace or tried to walk. It was terrible. No sign of Susan, no call, nothing. Officers did go out and look for her, but by the time they found her car, there was no sign of Susan. It is a nightmare not knowing who he was or what his intentions were. So after her car was found and processed, 2:06, her mother, Kathy, drove it back to their home, and she just parked it on the street. It was just such a very scary and hard time for the family, but she was also really hopeful that her daughter would be back soon. Days later, though, Kathy decided to drive Susan's car to the grocery store called Cub Foods in Stillwater to just pick up some groceries. But not long into her drive, smoke and steam started coming from the engine, forcing her to pull over. At that moment, Kathy realized that this was the reason why Susan had pulled over the night she disappeared, because of car trouble. After Kathy pulled over, she had Susan's car towed to Lake Elmo repair, and at the shop, a mechanic discovered that the radiator's drain plug had been loosened. The coolant had leaked out, which caused engine to overheat. Now, hearing this, Kathy and Christine couldn't help but ask themselves, did someone deliberately tamper with Susan's car that night? Did that man who approached her at the gas station mess with her car earlier in the day, then follow her, waiting for it to break down? Was all of this part of something bigger? These were very important and very real questions, and investigators knew that they needed to dig deeper. When speaking with Susan's co-workers, investigators learned that she had mentioned to them that she was supposed to see her ex-boyfriend that night. However, he ended up canceling because of the snowstorm. Now, when Susan's sister Christine was later asked if he matched the description given by the gas station attendant, she was certain that it was not her ex-boyfriend, as he did not fit the height or the build whatsoever. But then Susan's co-workers remembered something else. She had been repeatedly receiving calls at both of her jobs, apparently from Dale. Now, if you recall, Dale was a guy that Susan had met on the chat lines, and investigators learned that the day before she had vanished, that's when Susan had mentioned Dale to her mom and how she wanted her to meet him in person. However, when investigators looked into Dale, there was no trace of him found whatsoever. So then investigators moved on and they found another name on their list. They learned that at the club that Susan and her sister frequented, which again was called Bumpers, the son of the club's owner was someone that she had connected with, and that he had even visited the family home. Eventually, police tracked him down and they learned that he had a criminal record, not for violent crimes, but for fraud, swindling, theft, and forgery. He was questioned. He took a lie detector test and he passed. He also had an alibi, and there's never been anything concrete to tie him to Susan's disappearance. So investigators needed to continue searching for more answers. Christine said that Susan would not have wanted to be out in bad weather in general or just to meet a guy. She said, quote, she was so scared of storms. She was petrified of them. When she talked to Mom, she wanted to know the safest route home. If she had a plan to meet someone, that would not have been the night to go. She would have wanted to get home. That's what really throws me. Now, a lot of people online agree with what Christine said about this. You know, if Susan did really want to meet with a guy that night, why would she pick this night? You know, in the middle of a snowstorm, in the middle of a blizzard, when she already had plans to meet with her mom and her sister to watch movies and have popcorn, you know. 509, if she had already agreed to this plan beforehand, and then the snowstorm and the blizzard kind of surprised her. You know, maybe she would have canceled this date, or maybe she would have called to let him know, like, I'm not meeting you tonight. I just think that what Christine said about this, about it not making sense, that her sister would want to meet a guy on the night of a snowstorm when Susan was really scared of storms. She was really scared to be driving in this. It just doesn't really make a lot of sense. Now, about a week after Susan disappeared, Kathy and Christine tried to get out of the house to clear their minds and just get back to a sense of normalcy. Kathy returned to her job at the University of Minnesota's math department, and Christine went back to school. However, one afternoon when Christine got home, something was wrong. She couldn't find the keys to get inside the house through the back door. It seemed like these keys just vanished into thin air, and the keys weren't where they normally sat by the door. However, after searching a bit more, she finally found the key, but it was in a spot that it normally did not belong. And once Christine entered the 1608 home, the sense that someone else had been there hit her instantly. Now, I'm not sure if any of you have ever experienced that before, but it's true, 615, that you can just kind of sense when someone was in your room or in your house, and that's exactly what Christine felt. Plus, she realized that there had been dirty dishes cluttering the sink, which weren't there that morning, and the air had a strange smell, something Christine and others suspected might be the smell of grass, not the grass that's outside, but, you know, that other kind of grass substance. So Christine froze in the corner of her living room as she analyzed all of this, and she was too afraid to go upstairs or touch anything. She just couldn't shake the feeling and was 100% sure that someone had been in their home. Later that night, while Christine and Kathy waited for the police to arrive, they continued looking around for anything else that stood out, and they found something. Christine found the pair of red pants that searched the house but found no real clues about who had been inside or Again, why? None of it made sense, and it felt like Kathy and Christine were just staring at a brick wall, just stuck and confused. All they wanted was to find Susan. Sadly, months and months would go by exactly like that, with no new clues, no answers, and above all, without Susan. When Kathy reflects on the way the case was handled from the start, she gets really frustrated because Susan was initially treated as a runaway. You know, she was 19 years old at the time, so she was a legal adult, and according to the gas station attendant, she appeared to get into that stranger's car willingly. So the police could not 100% rule out the possibility that she had left on her own, which really hindered the investigation. Her family, however, knew for sure that Susan would simply never run away. She wouldn't do that to them. On top of that, she left behind her glasses, her purse, and her ID in the car, so there's no way that she would leave that behind if she was running away. Investigators also hadn't checked for fingerprints or followed up on the dirty dishes that were found in the home, which were again definitely not there when Christine had left the house. Authorities also initially assumed that Susan might have simply gone off with a boyfriend for a couple of days and that she would eventually come back. But, I mean, as you can imagine, hearing all of that was very frustrating for the family. The fact that they didn't fingerprint or really check the dirty dishes that were found in the home, the fact that they thought Suzanne had just run away with a boy, it was all just really frustrating to hear, because her family just knew that none of this was normal. None of this matched Susan's behavior. So despite how frustrated they felt, they also did what they could. You know, the family made posters, they put them up all over town, and they tried to spread the word. But coverage in Susan's disappearance was minimal in the media, and the case pretty much fell through the cracks. In May of 1989, a little over a year after Susan vanished, there was finally an advancement in her case. Investigators requested her dental records after the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension issued a teletype about an unidentified body. The family had hoped that there would be answers, although of course they feared that if this was Susan, that meant that she was gone forever. But the results came back negative. It wasn't Susan, so the investigation continued for over a decade with no answers. In 2002, Kathy and Christine entered their DNA into the Minnesota BCA records, which were actually the first missing person relative samples ever submitted in the state. So now, alongside Susan's dental records that they obtained over a decade ago, this served as a permanent reference for investigators to compare against any unidentified remains. In the years since, police remained vigilant of bodies or remains that could be matched to Susan. Dozens of potential leads have been checked. Yet to this day, there have been no matches. Another small update on Susan's case was when authorities discovered a hit on Susan's Social Security number. But it wasn't long until investigators learned that the hit was a result of identity theft. So, aside from the small update, Susan's case has unfortunately gone quiet. 7 police have been clear about the fact that there was no evidence of a forced abduction, of a kidnapping, or a false imprisonment. From what the gas station attendant recalled, Susan entered the car voluntarily. That's all police know, for sure. But who was this man? Why hasn't this man come forward, identifying himself as the last person to see Susan? It's just odd. And it wasn't until 10 years after Susan disappeared that anyone tried to actually create a composite sketch of this man. And since so many years had passed, between details about him were getting blurry. The attendant now remembered him with curly, almost black hair instead of the sandy brown hair that she had initially recalled. And the car that this man drove seemed darker than she had originally said. So this sketch that I'm going to put here on the screen might not even be accurate in the first place, but that's all we have for now. And still, even though the sketch is out there, no tips have come in about him. Yet again, this is another important clue, but another dead end. Then in January of 2018, Washington County Sheriff Dan Sterry held a news conference to introduce a new cold case unit and announced that solving Susan's disappearance would be their first priority. Under his leadership, investigators began re-examining the case from the very beginning. They were interviewing old acquaintances, revisiting old evidence, traveling to other states to speak with anyone connected to her disappearance that had moved away. And they were also doing DNA testing, the red pants that Susan had been wearing the night she disappeared, which were found in her bedroom in the days following her disappearance, were submitted for DNA testing multiple times, but sadly no new information has emerged. Age progression imagery has also been used to keep the case current. In recent years, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children released an updated image showing what Susan might have looked like at 54, although today she would be 58 years old. So, for Susan's family, the pain of not knowing what happened to her or where she is has never faded. As of today, 38 years later, investigators are determined to find out what happened that night and to finally give answers to Susan's family. My heart goes out to her family, and wherever Susan may be or whatever may have happened to her, I do just hope that her family gets answers and closure soon. My deepest condolences go out to all of them and to all of Susan's friends as well. 4 years ago, Christine wrote a letter to Susan, and I want to read it to you guys because it just really shows what her disappearance has been like for her. You know, how much she misses her sister and how deeply this has shaped her entire life. Or as Christine wrote, quote, "To my dearest Sue, to say I love and miss you would be an enormous understatement. When I think of our childhood and how much we endured together, and then when we finally were able to live with Mom and everything was going so well in a skipped heartbeat, you went missing." There's a new phrase that I have begun to say that resonates more on how I feel, a back to the future feeling that has now become life for both Mom and me. It feels like we've been jetted into the future with 3 decades missing in between, and all we want is to go back. How can I be 51 when I still feel like the 16-year-old looking out the window waiting for you to come home? You would be 54 and Mom will be turning 80 this September. Oh, how we would do anything to just jump back in time and have you home and safe with us. We still have your things, room set aside for you, all just as you left it. We just need you to be home, and we can dream together again. You are so loved, and we will never stop searching 24/7 for you, your sister Christine. I thought that letter was absolutely beautiful, and it broke my heart when she said, "How can I be in my 50s now when you disappeared when I was 16? I mean, that just shows how much time has passed since Susan disappeared. Christine was only 16 and Susan was only 19, and now Christine is in her 50s and Susan would also be in her 50s. It's just unfair that so many years have passed since her website on the screen and tips can remain 100% anonymous. Susan's story is a reminder of how vulnerable we can be, especially at night and in bad weather. So if you are ever having car trouble, do try to stay in a well-lit, populated area and call someone that you trust or roadside assistance. It's important to also keep emergency supplies on hand just in case. So I will be leaving some resources down below on companies that offer specialized roadside kits and emergency tools that help women stay prepared and safer on the road. With that being said, that is all the information that I have for today's video. I wish we had more answers, and I wish that Susan's family had the closure that they need. Thank you for being here to listen to Susan's case, and if there are any updates, I will make sure to let you know through a comment down below. Please let me know your thoughts on this, and if you guys have not seen my last video, we talked about what happened to Fernando Sosa. If you're watching on to YouTube, I will leave that video linked at the end, or you guys can click the card above to watch it. Now, if you're listening on audio, you guys can go to my last episode to hear Fernando's case. As always, if you are looking to listen to something fictional, you can go to my second YouTube channel called Let's Set the Scene. I just covered the horror comedy Clown in a Cornfield. This is a movie about a girl named Quinn who moves to a small town that she thinks is just boring and lame. However, this town quickly changes her mind when a killer clown starts hunting down all of the local teens. It is a really crazy movie. So if you guys want to watch that, that will be linked down below. Thank you, guys, again so much for being here. Stay safe, Amelia, and I will see you guys very soon. Bye, everyone.